All right, we'll call this meeting to order, starting with the determination of the quorum. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Chairman, we have 6 present and 1 absent, so we do have a quorum.
All right, next we'll go with rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, well, thank you all for being here this evening. Up next is to approve the agenda. I want to make a suggestion for a couple of small changes in the order. Items 10C and D. 10C being the approval of the 2013-2014 audit report, and D being the radon sampling reports. Both of these items have visitors for us here this evening, so in recognition of their time away from some other duties, if we could move those earlier in the agenda, I think it would be greatly appreciated. So if we took those items and put them after item 5, the consent agenda, then they would be up very early in the evening, and we'll be with them in just a few minutes. So I'm going to make that suggestion, and I will at this time entertain a motion to approve the agenda with that amendment.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda with the amendment that items 10C and D take place between items 5 and 6. Any discussion of this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And that brings us to recognition, awards, and presentations, of which there are none this evening, to my knowledge. Okay. So we'll move then into community comment. So this is a time for any community members to step forward and address the board. There is a 3-minute limit per speaker and a 15-minute limit per topic. So I will be quiet then and wait to see if there's any community members who would like to step forward. I think I recognize every face in the audience. But we'll give it a little time just in case I'm wrong. Okay, I see no members of the community coming forward this evening to make comment. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the consent agenda. Items in the consent agenda are not up for debate, but any board member can remove an item from the consent agenda simply by asking to do so. Are there any items that anyone would like removed from the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, on item number C, I've talked to Mr. Sesker about this, but I'd like to, for discussion, remove 9 names with the job description of growth and development coaches.
Okay, so then let me just,
There's 9 names on there.
okay, I need to just sort of see where that is. This is under employment.
Yeah,
Is that right?
that's right, C, additional assignments.
C. So let me just make sure that that's clear to me.
Okay.
Scroll on down here, so give me 1 second.
And I counted 9
Item
names.
B is fairly, okay, item C. So item C are all of the coaches, okay? So there's more than 9 names under item C, so are there specific categories?
Yeah, there's a title.
Anybody who's a coach, is that what you're?
No, growth and development coach.
The growth and development coach?
Yes.
Tied into the.
I see what you're saying, so anybody who is a
Get the
growth and
title.
development coach, and that's tied into that,
Right.
you would like to remove that from the consent
Right.
agenda?
I counted 9 of them.
Okay, thank you. Now I follow and I see
You
it
got
on the agenda, so I appreciate that. So those items will be removed from the consent agenda. We will discuss them immediately after. Would you mind if I remove them until after items 10C and D, or would you prefer to do it before that?
I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, I would recommend then that we do it after items 10C and D. Do you expect a longer conversation or a shorter one?
No, it'd be short.
Okay,
Be
so
short.
then why don't we do them right away, just so
Oh,
it's out
okay,
of the way.
it'd be short.
If you think it'll be short. So we'll take those 9 names off the consent agenda, growth and development coach. Are there any other items that would be removed from the consent agenda at this time? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of the items mentioned.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
As I said earlier, this item is not up for debate, Mr. Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
In alphabetical order, with the chairman voting last, I will vote aye. Tom Casper,
Aye.
Pat Marthaler,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Chair Obershaw, Chairman England.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 6 in favor, 0 against.
All right, so next up for discussion are the hiring of 9 positions. The positions labeled growth and development coaches, that was previously in the consent agenda. So, Mr. Olson, if you'd like to start the conversation as you remove
I'd
them.
like to refer that to Mr. Sesker, because we had a conversation
Last week sometime.
last week about these items.
Yep, the growth and development coaches are coaches that we hired to help us implement the new teacher evaluation model. And as you recall, the state gave us a one-time amount of money to support this. And we talked about hiring an administrator, but then after reviewing that, we working with some of our staff too, we felt that it made a lot more sense to have more folks helping out with the teacher evaluation, particularly at the teacher level, to help with some of that implementation. So as a result, we created a job description for the position, and we went through a hiring process for the position, and then we hired those staff members that were qualified to do that position.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification. These individuals will not be evaluating teachers. They will be working with them, instructional designs and other kinds of activities, but will not be part of the substantive evaluation of those teachers.
That is correct.
Other questions, comments, concerns on these?
And then my
positions?
question to Mr. Sesker was, how were these people hired? I mean, to what?
The
How they were
process.
chosen?
The process,
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Yep, and I might, if you're okay, either Colleen Cardenuto or Nicole, maybe talk about that briefly.
My question was, there like seniority or union rules, or,
Okay.
I mean, it just, are we getting the best people, or is it based on seniority?
Sure. We put together a job description, and within the job description, there were specific qualifications for these coaching positions. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head, but I know one, for example, they had to have a prep period. They had to also be available before and after school, one or the other. They had to have a teaching license, and they had to also be part of the initial evaluation planning team or committee that Colleen had up last school year. So based on those qualifications, then our teachers that were interested submitted their names to our FEA president along with the HR office. The FEA team then brought forward names of individuals that they felt would be good in these positions, and we reviewed them as an administrative team and selected candidates from that pool of names.
And you're probably wondering why the FEA, this law really talks about the idea that we have to work in collaboration with each other to actually build a plan and to move the plan along. And so we do everything in collaboration under this particular law.
Was the seniority involved? If you're at the top teacher in that particular school, was that, or not, or
Seniority was not a determining factor.
just not? So somebody with 30 years experience as compared to 15, they could get one of these jobs?
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
if I
please.
can just make it, knowing each of those individuals, I would say that the selection process was really dynamic, because you have some very highly qualified teachers who had demonstrated a high level of teaching competency, and to have those individuals working with our teachers is a credit to the process.
Absolutely. We were very pleased with the individuals who stepped forward to serve as the coaches.
What role do these people play with our new untenured teachers?
They don't. This is, in this situation, these coaches are hired specifically to work with a tenured staff. We do have a mentorship program in which we hire our own staff to work with our non-tenured teachers. And I can tell you that Pam Kennedy is actually overseeing the mentorship program for the non-tenured staff.
Any further comments or questions? I will entertain a motion to approve these positions of, as recommended to the board, what was the name of them again?
Professional
The
growth.
coach, growth and development
Yep.
coach is what their names
So
are.
moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all very much. And now we will move on to item 10C. Consider approval of the fiscal year 2013-14 audit report.
I'll just step up to introduce Kim Hoberg from Clifton Larson Allen, and she will present the audit report tonight.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here this evening to go through audit results with you. In front of you, you have 3 bound documents: the financial statements for the district, the student activity financial statements, and the executive audit summary. This evening, I'll be going through the executive audit summary, as it has just kind of a brief overview of audit results and then some colored copies of some PowerPoint slides that we'll go through as well. So starting on page 1 of the executive audit summary, we have basically a summary of the audit results for you. And first and foremost is the opinion on the financial statements. We have issued what's called a clean or an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. That's the highest opinion that you can receive in the financial reporting world, if you will. So it means that your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Internal control over financial reporting, we did not have any deficiencies to report this year. We did not propose any material or insignificant journal entries, none at all. And then we didn't have anything in terms of financial preparation findings either. So very good job in terms of your staff in the business office and the work that they do to compile everything, get ready for the audit. I think it speaks highly of them to go through this process and to not have any deficiencies like that noted in their work. The single audit is the federal grant portion of your audit. Anytime you spend more than $500,000 of federal financial assistance in any one year, you are required to have this federal grant audit. For the year ended June 30, 2014, you spent about $3.7 million of federal financial assistance, just to kind of give you an idea of what was spent. We tested 3 programs, the Title I Part A cluster, the Special Education cluster, and then the Child Nutrition cluster, that program within your food service program we tested. We did have a couple of findings, more or less just housekeeping items in terms of documentation, nothing significant there that indicated any unallowable costs or anything like that. Very, very easy things for the district to resolve. Minnesota legal compliance is something that the Office of the State Auditor has us review compliance with 7 different areas of state statute. Our work relative to that did not disclose any findings as well, so a clean report on the legal compliance portion of the audit. The student activity accounts, like I mentioned earlier, there is a separate document that has the financial statements for those included within that. And the opinion that we provide on there is an adverse opinion because it's not based on a financial reporting framework of that of the district. The Minnesota Department of Education has you report on a much more simplified basis for those. It's more of a beginning cash balance, cash received, cash paid out, and ending cash balance, as opposed to the receivables and payables that you see within the district financial statements. So because of the more simplified reporting framework, we are unable to provide a clean opinion on that, but it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It's just the more simplified reporting requirements that the state has for those. Compliance with the provisions for the student activity funds, we did have one compliance finding related to those in terms of activity purpose forms filled out for each of the activities that go on within those student activity funds. So they're, again, pretty minor when we look at the grand scheme of things. Page 2 of the executive audit summary is the formal required communications. There are a couple of things that I'm going to highlight within this letter, and then we'll kind of move on. The first page of that on page 2 talks about the fact that you implemented a new accounting standard this year, GASB statement number 65. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or the GASB, determined that in terms of the financial reporting world, that there were things previously reported as assets that are no longer assets, and things previously reported as liabilities that they no longer consider to be liabilities. So they created 2 new financial reporting elements, kind of maneuvered some things around on your financial statements is basically what they did. And then they determined there were some things that you previously reported that you don't have to report any longer, and those being bond issuance costs. But really, in the grand scheme of things, it didn't impact your day-to-day activities. It was just more a financial reporting standard in terms of the impact for you at year end. The accounting estimates, I always like to remind you that things such as student counts as well as expenditure data is all still basically an estimate until the state finalizes those. We hope as early as February or March. Sometimes takes a little bit longer for them to do that. But the information that is used, that those are used for in terms of calculations, is based on the best available information at the time, and management doesn't believe that there would be any significant difference from what's currently estimated to what those amounts are when the finals actually come in about 4 or 5 months. With that, I'm going to flip over to pages 9 and 10 in the executive audit summary. Talks a little bit about the student activity funds and the fact that the receipting cycle for those is not as strong as the receipting controls, if you will, for the district, mainly because of all the door-to-door fundraisers that take place, all the different points of cash collection. Those kind of bring an inherent weakness within the activity fund internal controls, and you're not alone. Every district that has these activity funds have a material weakness around the cash receipting cycle for those, and it's just kind of the nature of the beast. A lot of districts try to figure out ways to ensure that what's collected actually gets receipted and put into the district records, but it's somewhat difficult when you have so many people doing fundraising and different points of cash collection. Page 10 then is one other item related to those student activity funds, very minor. We do a disbursements test. We do a random sample of 25. And out of that, we basically look at documentation to ensure that they're appropriate student activity disbursements, that they're approved, things of that nature. Ironically, a handful of them that we selected was for one refund, I believe, on a Costa Rica trip, and didn't have supporting documentation for that. Now, I'm sure that the refunds were valid, were made for a specific purpose, probably had students that decided to not participate in that trip or whatnot, but as luck would have it, we happened to select 6 of, I don't know how many in that population within our test. But you know, here again, if that's the worst that you have, it's really not all that significant in terms of the grand scheme of things when I look at the financial reporting of the district as a whole. With that, I'm going to move into the PowerPoint presentation to go through some financial data with you. We do have colored copies of the slides starting on page 12 of your executive audit summary. And the first slide that we have is the operating results of your general fund for the year ended June 30th, 2014. You can see on the far right the general fund improved a little over $1.3 million to a total ending fund balance a little over $10.8 million. As we move to the left, we have different categories of fund balance, those being health and safety and operating capital. Those are your capital-related fund balances. We'll visit those in greater detail here in a couple slides. The non-capital related restrictions relate to revenue sources that you receive from the state to be used for specific purposes. If they go unspent by the end of the year, you are required to set them aside to be used for those particular purposes in future years. Of that $140,000, the vast majority of it, about $119,000, is staff development. The remainder of that would be gifted and talented then. So otherwise, you're doing a good job of spending the money that you receive in any one given year from the state for those purposes. The far left column is made up of a couple different components, as you can see by the header on it. The non-spendable fund balance are items that are not easily converted into cash, mainly consist of prepaid balances. That's about $325,000. Then you have committed fund balance for separation and severance benefits. That's about $1.95 million that you've set aside to be used to pay out severance payments as they become due. And then last but certainly not least would be your unassigned fund balance, and that's right at $8.25 million. And as we go over to the next slide, we can see a history of your unassigned fund balance to really give you an idea of where you came from in the past and where you're currently sitting in 2014. If we do the math on that, as auditors, we always like to measure this unassigned fund balance to get a gauge of the health of the general fund by taking that and dividing it by the annual expenditures in your general fund. We come up with about 19.4%. And we have a next slide with the history of that particular measure of unassigned fund balance to give you an idea of the history related to that. So overall, the general fund does look healthy. There is nothing there that would indicate that you have any financial difficulties there, no deficits or anything of that nature in relation to various components. The restricted fund balances are next, and as I mentioned earlier, these are your restricted fund balances with revenue streams from the state to be used for specific purposes. Staff development is the vast majority of that $140,000. Next is operating capital, and we're getting into those capital-related fund balances. A little over $440,000 closing out the year, still continues to look healthy. I always encourage districts to have a healthy operating capital fund balance because your capital needs are often quite costly when they do come up, and anything that you do have set aside here allows you to spend it here as opposed to tapping into that unassigned fund balance, which you're using for general operations of the district. Health and safety fund balance is next, and you can see a deficit as it has been for most of the history that we have on this slide. A little bit of improvement from the previous year, but it kind of relates to a reporting error that took place on the state level a number of years ago. And you will be receiving levy authority for the next, I believe, 2 or 3 years to recover that deficit. So we should be seeing that come back to what would be a more typical or almost break-even point here as we look out over the next 3 years. Food service fund balance is next. This continues to look healthy as well. 2013 had a little bit of a decrease, and you purchased equipment, about $32,000 worth of equipment in that one particular year. So you had a little bit of a spend down, but you're back to building fund balance in that food service fund. I do like to see your food service fund have a healthy fund balance, really, because otherwise, if it's running in the red, the general fund is the one that would have to subsidize those operations. Community service fund balance is next. This really works on the same idea as that food service fund. We want to see it self-supporting, generating fund balance. One thing I will just mention related to your community service fund, this particular fund balance is made up of about 4 or 5 different components of fund balance. One of them currently has a deficit, very small, about $3,500. So nothing that would bear any major significance, but just something more just noting in terms of a deficit that's sitting in that particular fund. Capital project fund balance is next, and as you can see in 2014 that fund was actually closed out. In 2009 you issued the bonds for that particular project, about $15 million, and you can see the spend down, and now in 2014 everything's done, and that fund has essentially been closed out. Debt service fund balance is next. Not a whole lot of change here, except for 2012. You had some crossover refunding bonds that were issued, and what happens there is you hold on to that cash until that old debt gets paid off. That was about $5.5 million worth of cash that was sitting in an escrow account that got paid off in 2013. Otherwise, you don't see a whole lot of fluctuation here in that debt service fund. Your general fund revenue pie chart is next. The interesting thing with this year is if you were to compare it to the previous year's revenue pie chart, the percentage associated with each piece of the pie is shifted relative to one another. In particular, 2 pieces of that pie chart. The property tax piece, which is now 5.57%, last year was 8.51%. And the state sources this year, that is the 84.64%, last year was 81.31%. And the shift has to do with the fact that the state is what we call paid back that tax shift. Now, you didn't receive any new or additional revenue. It's just more an accounting mechanism that they had you recognize all this state aid, about $1.3 million, and then offset it with the same amount of a decrease to your property taxes. So that's why we're seeing a shift in between property taxes and state aids relative to one another within this particular pie chart. The final slide we have this evening is then related to the actual student counts. This particular slide is the weighted average daily membership, so seat counts weighted by grade level. The actual ADMs, or seat counts that we had at the end of the year, were 3793, just to kind of give you an idea of your seat counts relative to how they look on the weighting, which is what we have here. So overall, things look good for the district, financially healthy. Nothing that I would consider of any concern within fund balances or anything within those particular funds. We do have some additional information in the back of that executive audit summary, just kind of talking about some of the new accounting standards that were either put in place this year or will be coming down the road the next couple of years, as well as another appendix that talks a little bit about the changes that the legislature made in terms of funding, pupil weightings, all of that type of information, just for information purposes, if you will. Otherwise, things look good.
Questions? Yeah, thanks, Howard.
I had kind of a curious question here about the food service. You talked about a healthy fund balance.
Mm-hmm.
How do you determine what a healthy fund balance is on food service?
Well, really, the whole idea with the food service fund is that you're able to generate a fund balance sufficient to, at some point in time, be able to pay for capital needs to replace the equipment that is used to essentially operate that particular fund. You have been doing that. We see a lot of districts that struggle to just break even year after year. You have a history here of building fund balance and then spending down, either through leveraging revenue sources or costs associated with food is another way, or like what you did here in 2013, purchase of equipment. Your food service fund looks good. I have a lot of districts that struggle, especially with the nutritional guidelines that were put in place last year. Participation was way down for a lot of districts, and that food service fund tends to really struggle, and they're having a hard time breaking even.
Participation was down. What does that mean?
Lunch participation. Students weren't eating as much lunch. A lot of students tended to bring their own kind of brown bag, if you will. So that really impacted a lot of districts with their food service fund.
So we were better at that than other districts.
You have fund balance there. You have cushion. A lot of them have very little, if any. So yeah, it does look good.
I had a question on the last slide, the weighted average number of students. I know that formula changed in just the recent history. I'm assuming all these numbers were using at least the same formula to calculate what those numbers were, so
Yep.
retroactively you went back and calculated what those numbers would have been? Is
That will
what you did?
actually impact fiscal 15.
So it's actually the next year that those numbers change?
Yep, the
just so I
current fiscal year
understand.
that you're operating.
So these are
in.
not all with the old way of doing numbers, now that will change, and I'm assuming you'll try
That's
to
correct.
normalize it in the next
We
report.
will
'cause otherwise-
certainly try.
Otherwise, it'd be kind of challenging to
Yeah.
compare from year to year. But okay,
Yep.
but these are still all under one system, which was the old system in this case.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? This audit needs the approval of the board. Does it need a roll call?
It doesn't, but you can go ahead and certainly do that if you like. It's not a resolution, it's an approval.
Yeah, so we can just approve.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
We have a motion for approval of the audit. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I can just thank Colleen Murderstorff and Andy Johnson for all the hard work and their staff that put in a ton of time doing this, working with the good folks at Clifton, Larson, and Allen. It was a great process, and we appreciate everything that you guys do.
Yes, this is not a small task, and I'll say it again this year. I think I've said it in years past, that often somebody, if they feel like something is not going right in the district, often says something like, that district should be audited, and I think It's a great idea. We do it every single year. And it's important that we do it, and it's a lot of effort, and I appreciate all of that effort on the behalf of all the taxpayers to make sure that the financials are being handled appropriately. So we appreciate all that effort.
In addition, that it's required by law that we do it.
Right, right. It's not just a good idea, it is. We're legally obligated. Are there any other questions? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all. And that brings us to item 10D, radon sampling reports, which I think Kevin is going to talk us through.
Good evening. I'll let Thad do the talking tonight. I brought with me tonight Thad Daling from the Institute for Environmental Assessment. They are our environmental consulting firm that we have used for several years in our district. With that, I'll turn it over to Thad.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm Thad. I've been in the district now for about 5 years, helping out Kevin with all of the district's health and safety needs and stuff like that. So MDH requires us, Minnesota Department of Health, actually recommends every 5 years that we go through and test our buildings for the presence of radon. As many of you know, the state of Minnesota historically has some higher levels in its soil versus other states. Specifically, south central and southeastern Minnesota have some of the highest counts. So we are recommended every 5 years that we take a look at our buildings. To do this, the EPA has set some standards out there on how high the levels should be. They measure the levels in a measurement form called picocuries per liter, and they set that threshold at 4. We tested our buildings last December through last March. So from December 13 to March of 14, the detectors were placed over a 3-month period. We had just about 160 detectors, I think 156 detectors district-wide. We put the detectors on all the occupied levels or occupied spaces on ground levels or basement levels. So we didn't bother with putting them in boiler rooms, custodial closets. We wanted classrooms or offices, places where high occupancy was. Of those 156 detectors, we found that 12 of them came back over the action level at the 4 picocuries per liter, 10 of those being at one building, the ALC. From here, we need to look at following MDH protocols. The Department of Health has put protocols in place, and what they want us to do now is take what they call a continuous radon monitor, which will actually measure the rates. It's a little machine that measures them hour by hour to see when those levels are at their highest. Is it during the day when the building is occupied, or is it at night when the system is shut down and we're in energy management savings mode? So that's our next step. Kevin and I have decided that we are going to wait until about this time of year now when the buildings are starting to close up and we can get a worst case scenario. So it wouldn't do any good to do it in the summertime or in the spring when dampers are open 100% and we've got a lot of fresh air, and we want to get a snapshot in time of a worst case scenario. So when the temperatures fall outside is the best time to sample for radon levels. So that is our next step. Any questions from the board?
On these items?
I remember reading it. Where were the other 2 detectors? That
One was at Jefferson and one was at Nearstrand. And those areas will get sampled as well or retested.
That, just to clarify, so if we find that, so I guess as I understand it, the 2 scenarios are now, as we put in this detector that now can see various times of day and not just average over all the day.
Correct.
That one of 2 scenarios could be true. The levels could be high during the day when it's occupied, in which case we need to mitigate it. If the levels are high only at night when it's unoccupied and the HVAC system is shut down, because I know that the radon is very related to how well the air is moving and how much it's exchanging with the outdoors. So when the HVAC system gets shut down, if that's the only time that the radon is high, does this mean that we need to take an action at that time if the radon levels are low, below that 4 picoliters during the day when it's occupied? Is that what the?
Nope, MDH best practices, which they just came out with back in 2013, will say if those levels creep up over the night while your HVAC systems are shut down, that is fine, as long as they are back down to below the action level when the building is occupied.
Okay.
And then they want you to retest every 5 years to make sure that that is still
That
holding
stays
true.
the case.
Yeah.
Now, then the other possibility would be that these levels are still high during the day when it is occupied. Would the next step probably be to examine that HVAC system and update that system so that
Yes,
you
they
get more
want-
air moving through the building?
They want you to tweak the system, so, change the schedule of it, not necessarily change out equipment altogether, but at least go into the controls of the system and maybe tweak it that way.
So that we make sure, it might be less energy efficient, but to make sure that.
Right,
radon
maybe
is
having to
still-
start those units a little bit earlier in the day, making them run a little bit later at night, that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Are there other questions for Pat? Yeah.
Yeah, being a building official, I test for radon too, and you're basically talking, are you thinking about like continuous ventilation in these buildings, like the ALC, or what? Is that one of your solutions, possibly?
I'll let Kevin.
ALC was this last test was in 2014. The test before that was in 2009. ALC had high readings. I did get the CRM in from the state, continuous reading the monitor. The readings were just that. They were low during the day when the ventilation system was on. As soon as it went off, we saw them creep up. As soon as the system went on, we saw a dramatic drop, and it was low during the time. So it didn't require us to do any mitigation other than to just do what we did. And if it is high during the day, the state has protocols and what to do. Some of it's just simply is allowing more outdoor air to come in. Your energy management kind of gets thrown out the window a little bit, but you get more fresh air in, and solution to pollution is dilution. So you just dilute it out more so it brings the level down. You like that one?
I gotta write that one, I'm writing that one down.
So,
Pardon?
Can you repeat that? Solution to pollution?
Solution to pollution is dilution.
I got that one.
Good to know.
let's moving along, so.
That's going
So-
on the cabinet wall. Yeah.
Oh, no.
So Kevin,
Goes on
just,
the cabinet.
so you would also suggest that in fact history would say that we would have expected high readings from these first tests, which are averaging over the entire day,
Yes,
because this happened last time.
yes.
So we would expect that if things are the same, that we need to do the test to make sure that's the case. But
Yes.
history would tell us probably when we do this next test, it'll be low during the day and there won't be further things to
Yep.
demonstrate, but we'll need to do this again in 5 years. Okay.
Long-range plan for the ALC, and I think it's 2 years, is to redo the HVA system, the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system there. It's the last building we haven't done the upgrade to. Our plan is to redo it in a couple years and receive some health safety funding for that.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Kevin, I appreciate it.
Anything
Other
else?
questions?
Is there custodians during this time?
No.
Or they've gone home?
They've gone, well, they start at 6 o'clock in that building, and that's the time the ventilation system comes on. In the last round of tests, when the ventilation system came on, it was within 10 minutes or so, the level dropped dramatically.
So we won't have to do any construction at all?
Not at this point, no.
Okay, excellent. Okay,
Thank you.
any other questions?
Just a comment, I failed to recognize Kevin for an award that he got that we put down there, but the Minnesota Educational Facilities Management Professionals Association, commonly known as MASM, recognized Kevin as the Outstanding Contributor Award for Health and Safety Director of Buildings and Grounds for Faribault Public School Districts for the state of Minnesota.
That should have been in the recognition.
I know, but I didn't want to.
Well, we didn't miss it, so that's the
We didn't miss it,
so.
yes.
Any other questions before we let these folks go? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Kevin,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, and there's nothing for us to take action on, is that correct?
Correct.
It's just a report, okay, thank you. All right, so we will now return to order of our meeting as originally in the agenda. And that brings us to the curriculum committee, starting with a report from Ms. Carduno.
Good evening. We held our meeting on Monday, October 20th. We had our tech integrationists come and be introduced to the committee and to talk about all the things that have been occurring since the beginning of the school year and actually even into the summer. And I have Maria come up and have give you a little bit more background on that. We talked about also Imagine Learning, the Imagine Learning licensors that we hold. They have been purchased through title funds, and we intend to distribute them out per building, and there'll be more on that. We just kind of shared what the program looked like. It's really designed to help improve reading overall and designed to be used with struggling readers. And then we briefly talked about World's Best Workforce and that we would be updating that and sharing that with the board here relatively soon. And that's really all that we had time for. Just want to reinstate the idea that Monday, November 17th at 3:30 will be our next meeting. And I'm going to ask Maria to come up here as part of our technology report and to update you with what we discussed at the curriculum meeting.
The tech integrationists highlighted some of the projects they've been working on since school started, and one of the things they've been working on is with our new website. They've been providing a lot of training for our staff on the new website, specifically teacher web pages, and working with them as a group, developing their web pages for students and for their parents. They've also done a number of online video tutorials and online support documents for staff that they can reference at any time. They've provided before and after schools classes and one-to-one support in the classroom. We had a new grade book roll out this fall, and they assisted with that and providing online documentation and also support directly in the buildings during mid-quarter reports. We recently implemented Google Apps for students in grades 6 through 12. So they worked with all the homerooms at the middle school and at the high school, working with the students and helping them log into the accounts, as well as helping the teachers learn a little bit more about Google Docs and Google Apps so that they can collaborate with their students and set up Google Classrooms and so forth. They continue to provide iPad support and iPad videos and app support. And this fall or this November, they're working on providing training and support for our learning management system, which we're going to be rolling out in the fall. So they've been very, very busy, and teachers are really appreciating the support that they've been providing.
We've got an enormous amount of just positive feedback from our staff that, you know, when they need help right away with the technology or they want to plan a brand new project, that our integrationists have been there. Corey and Chris, last time they counted, they were over 500 connections with teaching staff just throughout well, since beginning of September. So it's really amazing some of the things that are going on because we do have those people in place. And then I'm guessing, Jason, is there questions about curriculum?
Well, I would add some things. Tom and I were both at this meeting. Tom, please feel free to add as you would like.
Yes.
And the bulk of the meeting, not the entire meeting, but the bulk of the meeting was on the beginnings of upgrading the technology in the district as we work towards iPads in the hands of teachers and iPads in the hands of students and many other things as well. That isn't the entirety. The iPads are not the entirety of the technology plan. There are many other aspects to it as well, such as the Google Documents and other things. I left feeling very impressed by the level of effort going into these projects. I felt very good that good thought is going into how we are moving forward in technology. I know many of the concerns are that simply we buy a piece of technology and we throw it into the hands of staff and students and really no one uses it. And I think there is a lot of good effort and thought going into handling this upgraded technology step by step, not trying to do it all at once, and trying to make sure that we're adding things as we're ready to use them. And I was very impressed by that. I brought up the idea, and we talked at length as well about making sure that we communicate that both to the board, so there will be future presentations to the board on the items as we progress through the year and think through these technology plans for this year and future years. but also to do that with parents and with the community as much as we can. This is a big change. It was very tightly integrated into the levy, and so there's a level of expectation of this occurring and being done well. And so to make sure that we are communicating with parents, because my perception is often, I've been at a few of the candidate forums and heard some of the questions coming from the community and listening to some of the candidates. There are some really gross misconceptions about how technology is used in schools and why we get technology in schools. And so, the one that I hear the most common is my kids already know how to use an iPad, they don't need one in the school. But we are not, if we put iPads in the hands of kids, it's not to teach them how to use iPads. They probably know that already. It's to enhance the classroom in a myriad of ways, not just to learn how to use an iPad, which is a good thing, but way down on the list of the reasons why you do something like that. I think our staff understand that and they're working towards doing it for the right reasons, but the more we can communicate that, the better, and we talked about that at the meeting as well, and I feel as we go forward, we'll be doing more and more of that. So thank you very much.
And then if we can roll into the technology report, I'll keep Maria up here with me.
We had our first district technology committee meeting on October 7th, and our committee meets the first Tuesday of every month. We have several projects that we're working on as a committee. We continue to focus on the tech integration and the ongoing professional development for our staff. We have started to plan our early release days for professional development for our staff and with technology and 21st century skills. We're also working on a new 3-year technology plan, kind of our vision or our roadmap for our district. Every 3 years we need to come up with a new plan for our E-rate funding and so forth. And then the biggest thing that we're working on right now is we're in the planning stages of our one-to-one mobile device plan. The tech committee has been divided into 4 subgroups, and each of those subgroups are going to be gathering input and information and then sharing it as a committee as we plan this one-to-one initiative. And in the upcoming months, I'll be providing more information on that. We just started meeting, some of the committees just started meeting this week on that, this week and last week, so we're just planning in the beginnings of that. Any questions?
I'm curious about our personnel needs in the whole area of technology. We added some people this last year, and are we pretty stable with that? Are we gonna be needing to add more, or where do you see?
Do you want me to answer that, or do you want to answer that?
Answer.
Right now, I think we're comfortable with what we have. We added 3 technicians for support for the infrastructure piece of it, which is extremely important, because the worst thing you can have happen is to start working on these technology projects and it crashes. So Maria and her staff and Drew and everybody else that's working on that infrastructure piece has done an excellent job of maintaining and keeping the machines running. Then we hired the 2 integration specialists, the 2 teachers on staff, a high school teacher and an elementary school teacher. And both Chris and Corey have just been doing an outstanding job. Not just showing, like Jason was saying, the iPads, but showing them quality techniques of what they can utilize the iPads for in order to enhance learning. So it's been very positive so far. Now, if I let Maria talk, she's going to ask you to add 3 or 4 more positions. But I think we're comfortable right now.
We really need to go in and to see what our staff is doing with our students with the technology that we already have in place. It's really exciting to watch our kids and what they can do with these tools. So, other questions? Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Next item is the policy committee. There are minutes from the October 21st meeting. Is there any report from the policy committee? Who would have been at?
I'll let Superintendent Sesker talk about that.
We-
It isn't much.
Yeah. Well, we did
20-minute
have.
meeting.
It was, and we actually were reviewing the discipline policy too, that I sent back to the principals to take a look at, where there are a couple areas that the state has outlined for discipline that we want to be consistent with the district, but at the same time, we know that discipline is handled differently at each level. So the principals have that, and we'll get that back hopefully the next time around. But in this particular meeting, we went through the conflict of interest policy. You have it with you, and if you have any questions about that after you read through it, feel free to give us a holler, and then we'll review it again if we need to. Otherwise, we'll have it for the second reading at the next board meeting.
Is it, we had one before.
We didn't have one, well, actually, we did have one. It just added, was
There
it?
was one paragraph that was.
Yeah, I think one paragraph is all.
A,
3A?
I think it was item 4.
4A, yeah. So if you read through it, it's pretty standard.
Any questions on that? Next, then, we will look at the introduction of a following policy for first reading. That is policy 210, conflict of interest for school board members. Is this just an update of a previous policy? I'm sure we've had this policy in place, if I'm not
That's
mistaken.
the one you just
Yeah,
referred to.
that was what I was referring to. Yep,
About
conflict. of
One
interest.
paragraph.
Yep,
Yep.
yep, so we don't need to
One
approve it.
section.
All right. Any questions on this one? It's just here for first reading this evening, so we will look at it again for second reading at the next month's meeting.
Yep.
If there are no questions, we'll move on to the next item. And this brings us to finance items. We have a finance committee report with minutes for you to look at. Would anybody like to comment on the minutes or from that meeting before we move into the items?
Oh, there was a big
Is that
discussion.
a no, Madam Treasurer? Or yes?
To help you vet out, there was a big
No,
discussion
sorry, I was looking at
on,
you. Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
on extracurricular fees with Ken Huber.
Regarding the cooperative
Cooperative.
Yeah,
agreements.
cooperative
On the cooperative agreements.
agreements, yeah,
Okay. And we can talk about those as we
Maybe
get to
just
those
want
as
to go
well.
item by item, maybe.
Sure.
we
yeah,
can
yeah.
Sure,
address
happy to do so.
that.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard.
Um,
Covering for me.
So this brings us to item 8B1, Imagine Learning Contract.
The finance committee approved this contract. We had a little bit of discussion. I don't know if people wanted Colleen to speak briefly about it
Mhm.
tonight. I'm sure she would be willing to do that, but we did have a trial at the STEM program this summer where it was used, and it's been effective and
Yep.
powerful tool for the staff.
It is paid for with Title I money, is that correct?
And Title III.
Title I money, so this is not an expense coming out of general funds for the district, but out of funds specifically for this targeted group of students, is that
Correct.
correct understanding?
Chair, I read through the contract, and it was someone could explain what actually this company does for $60,000.
No, you can.
It's a program in which our students will pretty much be assessed as they get onto the program, and it looks at the different levels in which they'll begin and builds off of that. And so some of our students are struggling with phonemic awareness, and so it will bring them right to the phonemic awareness pieces that they're struggling with and help to enhance them. And another kid might be struggling with phonics, so we'll bring it to the phonics part of the program. And it really develops it through a great interest to our students. So if you're seeing the program at its level, you're going to see some kids that are going to be sitting and, clapping out things. You're going to see the other kids singing right next to you and the other kids speaking into the microphone. It really does a variety of ways to enhance the reading skills of our students. And I'm going to turn to Todd too, because he has seen the program in action.
Yep. Where I've seen it work most effectively is, well, Title I works well too, but I've seen it with the L program or Title III programming. And the data that's coming out of it is the kids who are speaking a different language other than English are learning their reading habits and their sentence structure and phonics and in their own native language, and at the same time they're learning English. And it's showing some very positive results both academically and for these EL students to transition from their native language to English as well.
It's not to replace the classroom teacher. It's not to replace the classroom program. It is really a supplemental piece so that extra time and support piece that when students are struggling, it helps to provide that. And it provides it in a way that engages our students. And we're really watching the data. We used it in summer STEAM, and we looked at just those 6 weeks to see that we made gains, and we have seen gains through this program. We're going to continue to monitor it because we know where they started with our NWA results, and we're going to see what happens in the winter and the spring to ensure that this program is continuing to grow kids. But what we saw in the summer, that short 6 weeks, it did look like it was helping our students move along.
So if I can, Mr. Chair, ask a clarification. Somebody or some way they come in and assess our students that are receiving Title I. So it's only for Title I students. And then they develop an instructional strategy for those students?
No, I think it's, to be clear, this money is for licenses for customized software.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is a software license fee.
Students are learning on the computer, working
Yes.
individually.
Right.
Supervised by our instructors.
Just another tool.
And they would, and maybe an example is they meet 20 minutes,
Three times a week.
3 times a week, the students to work on this particular software.
And it's,
And it's monitored by whom to make sure that they're using the software appropriately?
So we have like myself, I have the ability to see exactly who's on it, how much time they've spent on it, where they started, where they're ending up. I'm not the only one. All administrators can see it. The teachers can monitor it. Currently, we're keeping an eye on it because we want to see it produce results, to be honest with you.
And we don't have the resources within our own district to do this without expending the $60,000.
It's an additional way. So we have small group sizes that are about, a small group size of approximately 15 as we look at our kids that are struggling. And it's a way in which, we can have them, it's individualized for that student. So you can put 6 on there, and in each of those 6 licenses, those kids, it goes right to the target area of which they're struggling. At the same time, you can have a title teacher over here working with 6 other kids. And so it just expands our opportunity to ensure that, we're meeting all their needs. And we're trying a variety of ways to meet them. So it's not just one way, it's a variety of ways.
I think it's, at its best, it's as good a differentiated tool as we've ever had. And if we have a newcomer, and I know that Sam Oak has really spoke highly of it, this will adjust to that newcomer's academic needs regardless of what that age of that student is. It's really hard for me to put a 13 or 14-year-old kid in a kindergarten or first grade classroom. That doesn't make any sense. So with this software, data has shown that a lot of this catch-up time will be enhanced and will be a lot quicker than it has been in the past.
And the other positive about it, and I know that we're not there yet, but we do have the ability, they do have the ability to use it at home. It has now become an iPad app, and so our students can not only use it within the classroom or within the school day, but they can use it outside the classroom. A component that we haven't sent letters home, but we should be doing here soon.
So how many students do we see using this in the coming year?
Well, we're looking at, so we have about 60 licenses per building in the area of title, so that's about 180 licenses. We have 19 that we're having discussions with where the best place to put them, because we were dividing up equally originally, and then 60 in the ELL program at the moment.
It's about 250 licensed, 250 students.
250 students for the $60,000.
30,000 a year, yeah.
Yeah, and they have adequate time to use it?
That is something that we've been, rolling out to our title staff about the 20 minutes 3 times a day. And so that's what we were working on. We did use it in summer STEAM. We used it every day, pretty much every day in summer STEAM. I'm just looking at Anne-Marie and I'm elementary-wise. And so, so we also have the ability to use it in our summer STEAM program again. Those students that are logged in, we can also use it in our after-school programming. It's pretty much available 24/7 for our kids.
So does this give some of our ELL students a chance to do this instead of go to another classroom where we're trying to fit them in?
It gives us the ability to work in smaller groups. So, you might have I speak a title probably is the best way. You know, when we send our title kids, anyone that's not at grade level is identified as a title student. And so sometimes our small groups, which should only be, 4 to 6 kids in a small group, we're really looking at 15 kids in a small group. Well, that is not your best small group, obviously. So if these kids, you put them on for 20 minutes where it individualizes it for them, then the title teacher can be over here working with the students on, some of their small group needs. And then they can flip-flop, and so they can pretty much, work with 2 small groups instead of working with 15 students at one time. The other thing is, it's very engaging for our kids. It isn't, it's not more of the same. It is definitely things that our kids are attracted to. They like that singing along. They like the clapping along. They like the trying to figure out, the connections, because, it's kind of their world. It's when they get it right, it's that whole kind of in some aspects, like they win, or they, it's motivational. They win something.
I sense you're pretty pleased with how it's going so far.
Well, with summer STEAM, I was pretty pleased with what we saw. Now, again, I'm really monitoring it, to be honest with you, because I would like to see whatever it takes to make the gains is really what I'd like to see. And if it's something that's engaging and brings our kids along, that's what we're looking for.
Thank
And
you.
we just, so you know, no curriculum is perfect, no matter what you use. It's not gonna bring everybody along, but for some of these kids, this is gonna be what it takes to get them where they need to be.
Any more questions on this item? Yeah.
Yeah, can this be used for community ed?
It can be. Now, once you assign a student a license, you can only use up your licenses, because the licenses are connected to a student. So we can't double use those licenses. So it would have to be a child that's already signed up in the program. But yes, it can be used at
What
community ed.
about parents?
It probably could be used for parents, because there is a middle school and even a high school level. I don't know that we've tried that yet.
I was just thinking, maybe that's a question for Anne Marie, and I'm not sure what the adult basic ed view would be. You've had experience with the program, if it would be appropriate for adults or not.
Yes, probably not age appropriate for the adults. So we look to computer adaptive resources like Rosetta Stone. That's for a little bit more mature audience. And Community Ed actually has purchased licenses through the immigration or the refugee grant that we've had for the last couple of years. And it's been very successful at both the middle and high school level. So just to support what she's saying, I've seen the same results. Thanks.
Any further questions on this item? All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the Imagine Learning contract.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, now we are on to LNS captioning services contract. Superintendent Sesker, do
Do you wanna explain
that?
Well, we are utilizing it tonight. It's the new service that we use for captioning for our public meeting.
Okay. Are there other places other than board meetings that we make use of this service? At the moment, it's just for,
Because the equipment is in this facility.
okay. All right. Has there been any talk of using it any place else? I'm just curious, really, just. Any
I
thought
think
of any
we
place
have, I
else
think
that
we
might use
get
such
the
a thing?
interpreters for most of our meetings that we have.
Right, if we're not in this location for the board
We've been
meetings,
using-
then we hire these sign language interpreters.
All right, any questions on this item? I'll entertain motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second to approve the LNS captioning services contract. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up, the addendum to the Sodexo contract. Colleen is gonna tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Every time we go through our bid process and award the contract for food services, we use what the state develops, a model contract. And last year, they tweaked it quite a bit, or last spring, they tweaked it quite a bit, trying to encompass everything in one contract, because sometimes there were several contracts for summer food service and regular food service and snack and milk. And they forgot about the snack and the milk part of the contract. So that was left off of the contract, so we needed to have this addendum to identify what we would pay for snacks and milks for the coming year. The price is $1 per snack and 45 cents per carton of milk, and that has not changed from last year.
All right, any further questions on this item? I will entertain a motion to approve the addendum to the Sodexo contract. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all. Next up, the cooperative agreement with Bethlehem Academy and Discover School. I know there was some discussion about this, so if the members of our finance committee would like to tell us a little bit about this.
It was moved by a finance committee member to increase the rate from 25% to 30%, and that was passed at the finance committee, not unanimously, though I would add. So we're asking the board to consider the 30% rate cooperative agreements tonight.
Okay. Any discussion on this item?
What's that 30% based on?
The actual cost, and Ken, if you, it might be okay if you waltz up here a little bit, if you're okay with that, Mr. Chair. But it's based on the actual cost for BA or Discovery to actually participate in the program. So we figure out the actual cost of what it's gonna cost to participate, then we take 30% of that. So for example, last year, if it cost $4,000 actual cost for BA to participate in a program, we were charging BA only $1,000 or 25% of that. So this year, the finance committee is asked to go to 30% of the cost.
So it still does not cover the full participation cost.
No, only 25 or 30%. That's correct.
So 70% is still subsidized by the public school.
That's correct.
Thank you for coming up, Gail.
Some of the discussion around keeping it at 25% was that the cooperative agreement schools may not have budgeted for 30%, they may have budgeted for 25, as was in previous years, if that's accurate. Not accurate, that we might be increasing it by the 5% without them putting that in their budget for the upcoming year.
Approximately, what's the change in real dollars? You know, do you have
It's a few $100s.
It's a few $100s? Okay. So this is not going to be a budget breaker.
Ken,
And to be quite honest, there's always some variation as well, because when I put this together, it's based on what our expenditures were last year, and so if our expenditures are up or down a little bit, then this, you know, the amount that we build in goes up or down a little bit also.
and I know it's, Ken, by sport or activity specifically, but just generally, what is the participation from the non-public schools in our activity program? Just a general, certainly want to hold you to it.
And I just looked at that the other day. I think as far as BA's participation in, do we have that there?
Is that the right one that you'd be looking for?
Well, that's the dollar one, though. I do have a sheet that shows the actual numbers of participation, and I didn't bring that with. Last year, I think we had somewhere around 10 or 12 kids from BA participating.
Thank you.
In what?
Overall. I think we had 5
in
in swimming, we had 5 or 6 in boys hockey, or one of the hockeys anyhow, somewhere in there.
So the numbers are not excessively large.
No.
There are some schools that don't do any cooperative agreements.
That's correct.
And there were people who are on our finance committee from the public that thought we should be working towards moving towards 100% of the cost of our co-op agreements. And after a lot of discussion, one of the members said, well, why don't we increase it 5% and start indicating that we want to move in this direction? And I think my sense of the Finance Committee was there was some agreement with this idea of continuing to increase our co-op fees to more realistically cover the cost. Partly because, we do compete for students. And private schools are able to offer these athletic programs because we're willing to accept them in our programs, and yet we also subsidize the payment of them.
Ken, how common are these cooperatives? I was led to believe in the past that they're actually quite rare for a school district to do cooperatives with local private schools. Is that a fair assessment, or is that not fair?
That really depends on the community, and, Faribault's been fairly unique because of our relationship with BA over the years. We've had co-ops with BA, we haven't with Shattuck for the most part. Discovery has asked us to participate. They had one student in wrestling before. We have them down right now in hockey because they have one student who wants to participate in boys hockey, and so we formed a co-op there as well. It just depends on the community. Owatonna, for instance, used to co-op in some sports, and their board voted some years ago to completely eliminate them. Rochester kind of has bounced around a little bit. There was a sentiment a few years ago to try and eliminate them all, but they have to look at also trying to maintain some programs. For instance, Rochester Century boys hockey might not exist next year if they don't co-op, but in that case they're looking at co-oping with Stewartville, because Rochester Lourdes, of course, has their own program. So,
Okay. All right.
So in addition to the 30%, each student pays their
activity, that's
participation
correct.
fee as well.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me, if I'm interpreting what you're saying right, is that these co-ops of private schools are not common, but it's also not completely unique in Faribault, that
Right.
other school districts have looked at this for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, Mankato East co-ops, for instance, with Mankato and Loyola in 3 or 4 sports,
Okay.
I believe.
Excellent.
And I don't think our discussion had to do with not co-oping, it had more to do with charging the fair rate at what it cost us, because we're basically subsidizing those students.
Yeah, I would say the committee really supports the co-op,
Sure.
the programs that we have with VA. I would agree with that.
Excellent. I guess, just going forward, I might ask sometime, I guess the reason why I'm asking these questions is because I don't have a sense of what sort of standard practices around the state, how unique it is to do a co-op, what typical districts are charging for co-ops, and so we're kind of on our own and figuring this out, and it would be sort of nice to have a sense of what is standard around, what are others doing around the state for these types of things.
To be quite honest, I believe this contract is a little bit on the unique side, just because of the fact that many co-ops that are formed, if dollars are shared, it's based on the number of participants from each school. For instance, and I'll go back to Mankato East and Mankato Loyola. I don't know if they have any financial agreement, but they may say that if they've got one kid on the hockey team and there are 30 kids on the team, that they will pay 1/30 of the cost that year. My problem with that personally, and this is where this contract came from, or this basically the way we share the cost came from, is the fact that no matter what, if we have 1 kid or 0 kids, their population is added to our population, and in a number of our sports, we get bumped up a class and have to compete at a different level because of them being a part of our program, whether we have anybody from their school or not participating. So, our kids, no matter what, are held to that higher level, whether there's anybody from BA there or not.
So it seems like, towards that point, I had this memory of a sort of, over the years, dissolving and resolving these co-ops quite a bit for exactly this reason, that if it seems like nobody was participating, that we wanted to dissolve that co-op for at least that year, because to
Because
keep
our,
from
in
bumping
some
up.
case, we've done it when it has given our kids a chance to compete at a level that's more appropriate for them.
Okay, excellent, yeah. Mr.
Ken,
Rocha?
are there any programs that we would not have if it were not for the cooperative relationships? Or do we have enough numbers in our own programs to warrant the programs we have?
Normally, I would say no. I'm not sure where we're at with girls' hockey right now, because our girls' hockey numbers are pretty thin.
12.
Laura?
12 and 13,
And how many are from BA?
3.
Yeah, so we would not have a girls' hockey team this year without that
There's an example of that,
relationship.
for sure.
And from the standpoint of that relationship we've had for many, many years, very positive for the most part,
Correct.
that we've not had to increase our staffing because of the cooperative program,
Correct.
at least to your knowledge.
Correct.
Excellent, well, I'm very comfortable with the recommendation from, although I understand it was not unanimous, I'm comfortable with what the recommendation was from the Finance Committee, just personally. I think as the future, if we're gonna talk about changing that further, it would be nice to have a larger context to see what others might do, because sometimes I think that helps the discussion as well. Otherwise, sometimes I think it feels like people are trying to be penalizing one side or another, and somebody feels left out, and if there's a third party to sort of compare to, then you can not quite feel so personal about that. But I think 30% seems certainly like a fair number to me in light of where we've been. It's not a dramatic change, it's on the order of a few $100s. It will, I don't think, impact Bethlehem Academy's budget in a dramatic way, so
But
it's reasonable.
it raises a question, is what's our next step as far as negotiating this for next year? I mean, we need to work ahead of their setting their tuition and budgets and so forth.
Well, and I think that's where I guess Ken and I would look for some direction from the board. If you want Ken and I to sit down with the BA administrative staff to talk about that in the near future and bring you back a suggestion, then we would be more than happy to do that. But I want to make sure that the board's okay with us moving forward with that.
Well, I'm okay with the discussion, and without any sort of decision to go in one direction or another, not trying to push towards a direction. But then also I would ask, as I indicated earlier, to look a little more broadly and see further examples, so that we have a basis for what might be expected from other communities as well. That
So
would
if
be
you're
nice.
okay with us researching it, we'd be more than happy to do that.
But it's more than just BA, right, Ken?
Yes, like I said,
I
we've
should
got one
say
here.
all the
Yeah.
Right,
publics.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair
Just-
point too, that discussion shouldn't
Yeah.
just happen
Yeah.
at BA. Thank you,
Correct.
Mr. Rocha.
So
Other,
you just start giving enough guidance of what they need?
Yeah.
please, Mr. Olson.
Yeah, there was two no votes on this, and I was one of them, that I don't think we should be increasing it. Remember with BA and also Trinity and whatever, they're paying taxes, plus they're also paying tuition. And they are parents and supporters in this community, and for them to, we've raised this before, and we're raising it again, and there was a discussion to raise it to 100%, and I don't think we should be doing that. But again, I think the parents of like Trinity and BA, they're paying, like double hits on them. So I'll be voting no on this.
The counter argument to that is that we have a lot of parents whose kids don't participate in sports that pay taxes. And so it isn't just limited to people who are paying taxes or participating who are paying these taxes. Everybody's paying for it.
And in addition, many people in our community without kids in any school
that's right.
are paying taxes. So
That's the other thing, yes.
that we can't extend services to everyone. But I think I'm glad we have a positive agreement with BA. I think it's a positive for the community that those two schools work together on a lot of things. I think it's great. And I think 30% seems like a reasonable number to me, and any changes further in any direction, I think, require more discussion.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize, it's 30% of the,
Of
their.
BA's cost,
of
it's
their
not
cost.
30%
Yeah.
of our cost total. That's
Exactly.
clear, it's a very different number, yeah.
And just as a side issue, I think it's important to note that the cooperative programs are one component of a lot of services that come from the public schools to our parochial partners. So it isn't just cooperative relationships, special ed, transportation, counseling, those kinds of services are provided to our non-public schools also.
Absolutely. All right, any further discussion? All right, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion to approve the cooperative agreement with Bethlehem Academy and Discovery School. Further discussion on this item? Mr. Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
In alphabetical order with the chairman last, I will vote aye. Tom Casper,
Aye.
Yvette Marthaler,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
No.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Mr. Chairman Ingrid.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, we have 5 in favor and 1 against.
All right, thank you very much. Next up is item 8B5, an agreement of exclusivity with the Cannon River STEM School. Is this another cooperative agreement? Do I understand that correctly?
No.
It is,
Oh.
yeah, you better stay.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, it is for the middle school.
Yeah, it's good.
Basically, it's the same cooperative agreement. It's just, when you have a school like the STEM school that ends at 8th grade, does not have a continuation high school, if those kids are going to participate in our programs, we also have to have that agreement of exclusivity, basically because we want to make sure that if a kid is going to that school, you know, if there's a kid from Northfield and a kid from Faribault going to that school and they both want to participate in gymnastics, for instance, they would both then, with that agreement, have to compete on the Faribault team. So,
Okay. So nobody from the STEM school couldn't form another cooperative agreement with
Correct.
another district around?
Yep.
Okay.
and then along with that, we also have the same financial piece.
Same financial pieces previously discussed. Okay, thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion to approve, and then we can have discussion if required. Is there a motion to approve the agreement of exclusivity with Camden River STEM School?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Mr. Clerk, would you please do a roll call?
I will vote aye. Tom Casper,
Aye.
Yvette Marthaler,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Chairman Ingrid.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 6-0 in favor.
All right, thank you very much. Next item, 8B6, additional paraprofessional at Jefferson. Mr. Superintendent, do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, and if you pop up the memorandum, it's just the addition of a 2-hour paraprofessional at Jefferson. Remember, we hired an additional kindergarten teacher at Jefferson because of the enrollment, and we would like to, like the other kindergartners, kindergarten classrooms, have a paraprofessional in there as well. So that's what that is.
All right, thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, and that brings us to item 8B7, an additional paraprofessional at McKinley. And Mr. Superintendent, I'll ask you to.
Yeah, just real brief, I can probably cover this one. If I need help, I'll call you. But it's a $450 request, it's 30 hours per year cost to increase to help out with the Time for Baby Somali class. So you can read through again the request. So relatively small request, but we wanted to make sure that the Finance Committee and the board saw it.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries, thank you. And this brings us to item 8C1, the enrollment report. I don't know if Colleen wants to come up, but the summary is that it looks like the numbers have held firm in October, as would be typical for us in a given year. They creeped up ever so slightly, but I think in general the message is they've stayed the same. And that the increase we saw this year is definitely a real one from last year.
Yeah, remember the increase is actually about 20 students from last year to this year. It's just that our projections, we didn't anticipate this many students based on our financial projections. So we're up about 75 kids based on our financial
So
projections.
for the audience, we projected 3,735, and
Yep.
we're currently sitting at 3,812.
Yep.
Okay. Any discussion on this item? All right, hearing none, we will move along to, there is no financial report this evening. Consider acceptance of gifts and donations. I'm looking for my list. There we go. All right. We have two donations this evening to look at. Number one is Barb Willoughby in the value of $100, books and puzzles for the Lincoln Media Center. And from the Faribault Rotary Club, the amount of $3,500. These are funds being used to provide for the Respect Retreat. So as always, we thank all members of the community who step forward to contribute to the district both financially and in many other ways. So we thank you. And with that, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That brings us to item 9, other committee reports. 9A, Insurance Committee has no report this evening. Item 9B, Wellness Committee, it tells me that Anne Marie is going to come and tell us about that.
Okay, just to give you an update on the employee wellness plan, Yvette is also a part of that team, so just fill in the blanks where I'm missing. We are still running the same thing as we did last year in terms of an employee incentive, so $20 toward something wellness related, so a Fitbit or Riverbend Nature Center membership, anything to promote wellness. So we've rolled that out as of October, so we'll be getting in requests as the months go on. We're also looking at possibly providing water bottles with a Falcon logo on them in November, and so each month we kind of have a theme going. There's some things around mindfulness activities, paying it forward in January. We thought we would not do that in December since we're gonna all be in that chaos of giving, right? So we're gonna delay that until January. February, we're thinking maybe book club or article discussion within each building. So we're kind of trying to brainstorm those ideas. March, we're thinking about a giving campaign, and April would be socializing, because socializing promotes positive health. So those are kind of that's the summary, correct?
Share the overall name of the campaign.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was very ingenious.
That's right, And I think Nicole actually came up with it. 55021, which is our zip code. So so Richard, so like the 0 is no drinks without added sugar and things like that. So each number stands for something. So 5 is around promoting
Do we
5.
need Nicole up here?
No, yeah, exactly.
I was anticipating something bigger. I don't know.
This is motivating for staff to think about
No.
ideas like 5 servings of fruits and vegetables.
Right.
Or 5 ways
Right.
to improve your
Yes.
emotional well-being.
Doesn't that sound
Are
great?
you on the wellness committee?
Yes,
I
yes,
think we
but-
have the right board member on
I
that.
had nothing to do with this,
I would think it would,
program.
all board members
You
would
did,
be
too.
5K.
Oh, there you go. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
You think you're up for that?
Oh, sure.
I'll follow you.
As long as there's a refreshment freshman at the end of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And a doctor along the way.
I will follow Jerry Rochelle along any running race, that's.
Okay, well, I'm glad we had a
I just thought it was
nice
great.
discussion about
Sorry to
that.
sidetrack you again, Marie.
It's creative anyway.
Please
Yeah.
continue.
Good, yes, great, thank you. That's it for wellness. Any
Right.
other questions? Okay.
Questions on any of those items?
We dare not to.
All right. Up next is then,
Yes.
if there are no questions on the wellness committee, then community ed is next, and again, that's Anne Marie, so please.
Yes. So 3 things to just run by all of you. Care 11 came out to the middle school today to feature a Young Chef program that is provided by Carleton College students. Most of those students are majoring in some sort of science. So we had science through cooking. So teaching, today was a salsa lesson. So they put together their salsa, they chopped all their vegetables. So these middle schoolers are chopping, right? So that's scary, but it's good. It's all supervised by Carleton students. And they would take, for example, the pH level of the salsa to make sure there was enough acidity in it to prevent microbes from spoiling the batch. So just really sneaky ways of teaching science through something that they can eat. So it's edible science. It's awesome. Very, very fun.
Is it on TV tonight? Or?
Yeah, it'll be on TV tonight at 10 o'clock, Care 11. And if it's not on tonight, they said if some breaking story happens, which there could be, that they'll run it tomorrow or et cetera. So I'll keep looking and I'll send it around via email. Really fun. Mr.
I hope
Sesker
we're
was there
home by
too.
that time.
Yeah.
Say that again? What? What did?
I hope we're
Well,
home
you
by
have
that
mine
time.
hard,
We'll probably have a web link to the story.
Are you telling me to go a little faster? Okay.
It's the chair's responsibility.
Moving along, Anne Marie.
Okay then.
That's what Howard is trying to say.
Okay.
right.
ECFE, which stands for Early Childhood Family Education, celebrated 40 years statewide just this past week. So very fun. McKinley is going to celebrate on November 11th. That's a Tuesday from 6 to 7 by inviting the community to come in and listen to a children's musician named Hans Mayer. So very fun. And I just wanted to make a note, this isn't something that I did solely, but collectively, there was a really good turnout for the manufacturing tours on Wednesday, last Wednesday. 300 students participated. I accompanied the morning tours to a couple of manufacturing places, and the questions that I was with sophomores, just really excellent questions, just excellent attention. Our students really represent us well, so thank you for that. Very mature. It was a good experience, and I think overall that partnership with the community goes a long way. Then the students were invited back to the manufacturing luncheon on Friday at South Central College. So we had about 25 to 30 avid students show up for that. And it was just really great to hear from the panelists, some local panelists, just congratulate Faribault Public Schools on that partnership and wanting to recognize the work that we've done to bring that along, to bring that partnership along. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Okay. Up next, facility report. Kevin.
I'll keep it brief so you can get home for Care 11. Facility Committee has been meeting several times to discuss the possibility of building a new district office and an adult basic ed area. We met tonight, and we have 2 school board members, Mr. Robichaud and Mr. Olson on the committee. So far to date, we have looked at site locations, that being the middle school and the high school. Middle school for district office, high school for the adult basic ed edition. Our focus as of late has been on the square footage needs that we have. We've asked the user group committee and also the cabinet group, we have 3 committees actually looking at this, to put their wish list together on square footage or their needs for space. And started out as a big wish list. Now we've been refining that to get the numbers more manageable. When you ask them to dream, you ask for everything. We've been working on getting the numbers to something manageable that we can afford. So our attempts tonight, or our work tonight, was looking at that square footage, trying to get it down to a number that we feel the board will accept at the November 10th work session is when the INS group will be in to do a presentation to you as the board. Any questions?
Well, kind of along that same line, you're looking at ways of getting it down to a manageable number, but at the same time, what kind of anticipations are you making for the future?
Those are numbers we're working hard at trying to make sure they are workable. Yeah, getting it down to a number, can you afford, is it worth that then if you have no room for expansion? So we are working on the numbers, very diligently working on the numbers. I know next week at Cabinet, we'll be looking at the numbers very hard to make sure that, there is space for additional staff or for all our needs. It's foolish to build something and then we don't fit into it right away, so. That is our concern also, yes.
Or even 5 years saying, well, we didn't build it because we were trying to deal with a limited amount of money.
Correct.
At the time, and not borrow money. And so, we don't wanna be foolish and not build what we can anticipate we're gonna need in the next 5 years.
True, I agree, and that is a concern of the group. Those will be items we will look at, yes. Well noted. Other questions?
It's not a question, just a comment. I think, again, Kevin has provided some excellent leadership in this whole process of facilitating 3 different groups with 3 different needs and trying to say, that's wonderful, folks, but we just can't go to that level. So, Kevin, thank you for your leadership in this whole process over the course of this time.
Thank you.
Well, how do we decide what level we can afford?
Over there the time.
Buck stops there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Or with you.
There's still a process. The facility committee came up with a maximum amount of right around $4.7 million to figure out. That transfers down to about 24,000 square feet. And we're at that right now. And based on what Colleen had showed the finance committee last summer and in August, that parameter is still attainable. So we believe that we're in the same dollar amount figure that we originally talked about in the fall. The hope was that with the work that Kevin's done is that we'll meet right there in the middle, and I think we have. So I believe both the board members were very comfortable with the numbers that we put in today, and that's what we're going to be looking at to cement up so that the concrete for final proposal in November. And the November meeting, the board work session, I believe the architects will come back with a final proposal for you.
And that number makes sense to you?
Yeah, it does, yeah. Yeah, we've hashed over it a lot.
For our viewing audience and for those, we are currently leasing both those spaces, so it'd be owning versus leasing. So taking that money that we're currently spending, taxing the taxpayers, using it in a different way to build, plus some other financing.
Would that work session it would be open to the public, and maybe that would be a place people could learn about the proposal at that time? So, I mean,
It's always open to the
right,
public,
it's always
yeah.
open to the public,
Yeah.
but if people are interested in the building project. that
Well, I would
be good.
anticipate at that meeting probably making some decisions about having some following public meetings as well. At least one, I would anticipate doing as well. Just to publicize the meeting specifically for that purpose, I think would be appropriate, but I think the board, it'd be nice if the board can see a proposal first and then make decisions about how we want to proceed with bringing that to the public in short order, so that everybody gets his phone as quickly as we can do so appropriately. Okay. Excellent. Any further questions for Kevin on this item for this evening? All right, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Kevin, and for all the committee members who are working so hard on this important project for the district. Okay, that brings us to item 10, other matters, beginning with the approval of resolution for Minnesota State High School League Foundation application for grant for student participation, which I don't remember at all what that means. Ken, do you want to tell us you're here? I'm assuming Ken is the one who should inform us on
I think that would be appropriate.
what this,
This is the annual MSHSL Foundation grant that comes from the tax money from section and state tournament tickets. And we have to apply for it by November 1st, and then based on free reduced lunch population, the State High School League then will send us a check. We use those dollars to help cover the cost of kids who are on free lunch who can't afford to participate in activities. Just as a little add-on here, it would help to have some people possibly talk to local legislators, because this is something that unfortunately is sunsetting, and we would like to see this continue. You know, the ability to use those tax dollars from those tickets to continue this funding this.
It could have been a resolution.
Ken, would you give me a sense of about how much money we're talking about roughly?
I think we get about, if I remember right, it's about $1,800.
Excellent.
Something like that.
Right, thank you, Ken.
Yep. And I can get you more specific information as far as when this will sunset and all that, but.
Great, yeah, that'd be interesting to hear. All right, thank you, Ken. All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on this item?
Too bad I didn't know about that. It could have been a resolution.
Yeah, certainly
I
something we
didn't
could
know
have thought
about. Could have been something we could have brought up. Now it's too late.
But I think we can talk to our local representatives as well.
The legislature's not in session yet, so
Right,
it's
so
never too late.
it's not too
Okay.
late, but it's just not gonna quite go through that process as
Yeah.
it went through before, if that's okay. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, it is a resolution and therefore requires a roll call, so Mr. Clerk, you would please do a roll call. on item
Alphabetical
10A.
order, I will vote aye. Tom Casper,
Aye.
Yvette Marthaler,
Aye.
Richard Olson,
Aye.
Jerry Robichaud,
Aye.
Chairman Ingrid.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 6 in favor, 0 against.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. Next up, item 10B, consider scheduling a special school board meeting on Monday, November 10th, 2014, at 5:30 PM in the district office board conference room to canvass return of school district general election. So after every election, as you guys I think know by now, we need to have a short meeting in order to look at the results and confirm that we believe they were fairly done, and that means to canvass the returns. This one would be scheduled to happen immediately before our work session, so we would do this, have a short meeting prior to the work session meeting, and then canvass them at that time. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on this item? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have already covered items 10C and D, so that brings us to item 10E. Consider approval of the AIA document with the INS Group Incorporated. So we've been working with INS for a while now to come up with the plans. And so this document would formalize that relationship with them and the work that they are doing for us in the planning for the potential building we've talked about. Mr. Sesker or Kevin, would either of you like to tell us a little bit about the contract, or maybe it's Colleen? I don't
It's
know.
pretty standard. We had our attorneys look at it, and they said it looks good. And again, it's more for the architect. So if we decide not to do this, and like we've discussed before, we'd have to pay them $21,500 or whatever they want. I think it's $21,500.
I'll move approval of the contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second? I'll just add, just to try and clarify for anyone who might be listening or watching, and to also make sure that I'm clear, but I think I am. So there's an amount of $21,500, is that the appropriate amount, that we have agreed to pay INS for this preliminary work. If we go forward with the project, that will simply be rolled into the project, the entire project fee that's agreed to in this. If we decide not to go forward with the project, we would owe this amount, them this amount. And I think the only other possibility I could think of, if we decided to switch for some reason architects
Right.
after this initial planning stage, we still would owe them this amount. So this ensures that they get paid for this preliminary work, and then it just gets rolled in. So I think that's my understanding, just to explain that for anybody at home, if nobody's correcting me, so I think that's true. Any further discussion on this item? Did we do a motion to approve? Or we have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, item 11, other items of information, 11A, student representative. Lauren is here with us this evening.
Yes.
Do you have things you would like to share with us?
Volleyball and football are like moving along sections, and Thursday volleyball plays, Friday football plays, and on Saturday girls swim and dive have Big Nine. And the theater troupe put on a haunted house for a fundraiser for the theater troops and their program. And student council added another blood drive into the fall, so now we have a fall and a spring one, and the fall one was successful. And dance and hockey for winter sports have started.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm curious if Lauren, if you participated or knew anyone who participated in the manufacturing tours that happened a little bit ago.
I did my honors chem class, the advanced chem class, Avid, and physics.
And did you?
I liked it.
Okay.
We went to the morning group went to the energy power plant in Sage Glass,
Okay.
and then the afternoon went only to Sage.
Okay. Yeah. I've been to Sage. It's an impressive facility. Any other questions for our student representative?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lauren. We appreciate it. School board member items.
Oh, Mr. Chair, I did attend the luncheon, the manufacturing luncheon, and was a very positive response about our student involvement. They were very excited about the numbers that participated in the student tours. And the panel of manufacturing companies need employees. They want our students to be employees, future employees. So anything that we could continue to encourage in our curriculum and relationship with the college, they support it, and they're ready to hire our students. So it was very positive and exciting event to attend, I think, for the school district.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And a great robotics presentation. I'm sorry, I wanted to bring that up too. Steve Ulrich did a robotics presentation and trying to involve community members and businesses in the program, and that was also great.
That's very good.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much for that. Any other items of
Mr.
information?
Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes, I'm just wondering, this has been in the news quite a bit. I wonder if we should start a discussion on the protocols to handle the Ebola virus and also this enterovirus D68. And at a work session, again, it's to have our school nurse there, then the county public health director, Deb Purfors, and a doctor. They wrote a recent article in the paper, David McIntyre, that I'm just wondering if we should start discussion, I don't know if any other city or school boards, in case those two diseases or viruses get close to us or in our community.
Well, I guess I'm absolutely open to it. I think it would be important to have a discussion about, and I would expand it beyond those two viruses, because I would, my own personal philosophy is that we need to be much more scared of the flu than we do Ebola at this moment. But I think discussions about how we handle contagious disease, we are one of the main points of how do I want to say it? We have a lot of people in small spaces. and so if there is an outbreak of any type of contagious disease, schools are someplace that need to think about that very carefully. So I think a discussion about what our protocols are in place for whether it's Ebola or anything would be appropriate for a work session. So I think that's a good suggestion, and I'll talk to Todd, and I think it would be a good thing to bring up in the not so distant future. Any other items of information? right, and that brings us to Mr. Superintendent. Any items of information?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Lauren was saying about the volleyball and football. There's also cross-country. Gunnar Wilson and Maddie Shevlin qualified for the state tournament. And congratulations to all the fall teams and the activities. The students have done a great job. It's been not only a great start academically, but our extracurricular and co-curricular activities are off to a great start too. Had a PDS meeting in Mankato. That's where the group of superintendents meet to do professional development with Minnesota State Mankato. It's a very valuable experience for all of us, and we get a lot of good information from that. We're working on a couple of new grants. One of the grants that we're looking at is a grant to recruit more teachers of color. And as you know, it's a pretty low population right now, and there's a grant out there that we're going to go for to see if we can help in that matter. So, I also went to the Salute to Manufacturing meeting that Anne-Marie and Yvette went to along with all the students, so it was very well done, very professional panel. Steve Ulrich, our middle school teacher, did an excellent job speaking, as Yvette said. Very proud of the work that he's doing, and also our move it forward as we go ahead with our manufacturing, engineering, and technology initiatives. I was also at the middle school for a little while with the program through Community Ed, through our Falcon Academy that KR11 did an episode on. Well, maybe it's just not an episode, maybe it's just a little, a little shot with it. I don't think I got on TV, but we'll find out, I guess, tonight, so I'm hoping I didn't. And other than that, that's all I have.
Can I just comment? Can you go back to Mankato and say, they don't need a grant to start recruiting teachers of color?
Yeah.
They should be doing that progressively.
Yeah, and I think it's more than that. I don't have the exact verbiage of it, but they're actually going to utilize some of the teachers that are within the current school system to pull them out of their classrooms and come up with another strategic plan on how to do that. So it goes a little bit more than just that initial planning process. But
Thank you. And I feel I can say that.
it's got some ties to it.
Mayor and I can say whatever they
That's
want.
right. That's right.
I've learned this. All right, item 12, dates to remember. November 4th, of course, Election Day. If memory serves me right, polls are open from 7 to 8. Does this sound right?
7 a.m. to 8 a.m.
Does anybody
Yes.
know? Maybe I shouldn't say unless I'm sure, but
Well,
I'm
it's
pretty,
8 p.m. for sure, but I don't know that it's
Seven to eight.
7 to 8, I'm
Okay.
pretty sure. So hopefully I'm not giving incorrect information, but I'm pretty sure 7 to 8 o'clock is the opening of those polls, so please go out and vote. November 10th at 5:30 will be the special school board meeting in order to canvass results of the election. November 10th at that same time will be the work session immediately following the special school board meeting. November 17th at 7:30 a.m. will be the finance meeting in the district office. November 17th at 3:30 p.m. will be the curriculum advisory committee meeting, also in the district office. November 18th at 4:30 p.m. will be the policy committee meeting in the district office, and November 24th at 6:30 will be our next regular board meeting right back here at City Hall Council Chambers. And that brings us to item 13, adjournment. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?